So, my book was about finding Superman, debating the future of public education, edited by Watson Scott Well. So, what is this book about? It provides different looks to the movie Waiting for Superman. There's a movie called Waiting for Superman that came out a few years back that kind of showed that charter schools were kind of the example and the way to go in education. And this book kind of combats that idea. It provides details and information on the perspectives of the movie. And again, this book, Finding Superman, challenges the perspective of the movie. So, what are some of the educational issues and problems that come about this? How to better serve low-income families, ASL students, special needs students. That's kind of a big topic within this book on how to take care of those who are in poverty. Another issue is how to retain teachers. Teachers are leaving the workforce pretty regularly now. And so how do you retain those teachers and keep them there? And then how to create better schools and learning. With teachers, instruction, and test scores, how do you create a school that's going to be successful and become better at learning? And then the last issue that we will cover is the myth of charter schools and their success. Are they really all that people talk about, that the movie talks about? How are they really? So, some of the background and causes of serving the poverty population and students. Passing rates and graduation rates are lower for this group that it seems like compared to students who are not at the poverty level or maybe not ESL. We are getting better educating them, but we must improve. Education altogether is getting better. Despite what people think, numbers show that education, we are just more educated than we ever have been in the world today. And then after 8th grade, the effective remediation is essentially over. After 8th grade, there's not much remediation that goes along at this point. So how do we retain teachers? 9.2% of public school teachers and 21.1% of private school teachers under the age of 30 are leaving each year. It's a pretty big number, but you see it's even more private schools that are leaving. And then half of the new teachers leave the profession after only 5 years, which is not a good thing. We know that there's a large population of older teachers at this moment, and if you have all the younger teachers leaving, we eventually will run into the issue of not having enough teachers. And then because of lower salary, you have a lot of potential teachers who never make it to education because they end up choosing another career. So some of the background and causes for creating better schools and learning. According to Waiting for Superman, the movie, and charter schools, teachers are the fault for all the problems, and they should fire the bottom 5% of performing teachers. They believe that firing the 5% of those teachers will actually improve scores because those are your teachers dropping the scores. And so if you get rid of those 5%, things will automatically get better. They also believe that teachers should be on merit pay, which not everybody agrees with. There's a lot of factors that go into merit pay that you cannot control, like the student themselves and their family background, what's happening in their life. Pretty controversial. And then you have colleges don't prepare teachers well enough. 2/3 are enrolled in programs that are considered inadequate at the time. There are no consistent standards for learning or teaching. No set standards across the board, especially for every state. Teachers should be held accountable in learning. They are the number one factor in learning, according to charter schools. And if they're not held accountable, they're the reason that students are failing. And then schools are not scoring high enough on test scores. And then background and causes for myths of charter schools and their success. Charter schools do better than public schools, according to the movie and charter schools. They think they are better and that they have higher college rates. They believe that bad teachers drop test scores, like the 5% we talked about, and teachers are more caring, more highly skilled than those of public school teachers. The only way to reach all students including impoverished students, is to go to charter schools. They're the ones who care more and are more highly skilled. So, what are some of the solutions to serving the poverty and special needs? Number one, follow Finland's lead. Finland is kind of the model school in the world for education. And one of their big solutions is more equitable funding for public schools. We know that poverty level schools, schools who are not funded properly, do have lower test scores. And it's exactly for that reason. They're not funded the way that they're supposed to. Finland is equal in their funding. And so that's a great model, great way to kind of combat this problem with the poverty levels in school. And then commitment to health and welfare of families. Honestly, the health and welfare is your foundational building blocks. This comes before worrying about test scores and everything else. We have to make sure that our students are healthy and that the welfare of our families are much, much better. Because if we take care of those needs, that's almost guaranteed we're going to see a great increase in test scores. We're going to see just better schooling all around for those poverty-stricken kids. And then mentoring programs. We know that a lot of them need mentor programs. We have parents who are single parents who may not be home a lot. We may have a two-parent home, but they're always working. And so who's really helping with homework? Who's giving them the help at home that they really need? So mentoring and tutoring programs would definitely help. And then individual paced instruction. Not everybody learns on the same level, at the same pace. If you had a set standard across the board where they had to master a standard and then move on, would probably be more likely. That would be really tough within the school year, but there are ways you could set that up. And then how to retain teachers. Obviously, salaries, paying the teachers, making their salaries comparable to other professions. If they're much lower than other professions, they're not going to waste their time on becoming a teacher. There's no merit in it. They do eventually have to provide for families and for themselves. And if they can't do that, just teaching, even though it's their love, sometimes your family needs that money or needs that salary, and it becomes a burden. So we need to make comparable salaries, and we don't need to blame the teachers for all shortcomings like charter schools do. Okay, it's not the teacher's fault. They don't need to shoulder the blame. There's a lot of blame to go around. There's a lot of other factors that go into shortcomings. And then again, did I mention pay the teachers? Creating better schools and better learning. We must have better leadership and community buy-in. We have to get people to buy in. We have to get the community to buy in to what we're doing, taking care of our families, finding ways to feed our kids, the basic building blocks of just life. And then we need consistent standards. Again, we need to be able to judge what we're teaching, what we're learning, using set standards. And then technology is very big. According to this book, Finding Superman, technology and the internet use is very, very important at this time. We're in a technology age where this is very important. Kids need to know how to use technology at this point and how to incorporate it. But it's just not the students. We also need to develop the teachers in a way that they know how to use it effectively in the classroom as well. And then non-school factors are the true factors regarding student achievement. It's not the teachers that drop student achievement. It's non-school factors. That includes family income, the student's background. And according to studies, only 10 to 20% are actual teacher factors that causes poor achievement scores. 60% of poor achievement scores are tied to family income and student background. Those are non-teacher factors that is out of the reach or control of the teacher. And then again, we just have to make teaching desirable, make it a profession people want to go into. And then myths of charter schools. Many charter schools actually perform worse than public schools. Only 17% do better. Lots of public schools have just as good college rates as charter schools do. Again, we talked about the non-teacher factors, poverty, health, all those things. Teachers at public schools have just as good education and qualifications as charter school. There's not a special school that these charter school teachers are going to learn more about. They're going to the same colleges, learning the same things. These public school teachers care just as much. We have public school teachers using money out of their own pockets to fund their classrooms and to buy supplies and things like that. So the care is definitely there for public school teachers, maybe even more. So what are some of the biases that I saw in this book? There are a few. You could tell that most of the contributors to this book were mostly against charter schools. It wasn't a complete charter school bashing, but it was pretty close. You could tell that they were definitely in favor of public schools and against charter schools. Most of these contributors were from the public school setting. They hadn't really been around charter schools or been a part of charter schools. And they were also against money of how they're used for charter schools. So we know that charter schools are funded publicly, but they're also funded privately as well, as where public schools only get public funds. And then they definitely argue for Finland's school methods. Again, Finland is kind of the model school for the rest of the world on how to run things. And so Finland is definitely brought up quite a bit in Finding Superman. And they kind of push for following the model for Finland. So my perspective on this is I agree with the notion that public schools are as good as charter schools. I do believe that there's a lot of public educators in schools that do just as good a job, if not better, than charter teachers or schools. Teachers are not to blame. There are many factors involving in underperforming. Okay, the teacher should not, again, shoulder the blame like charter schools say they should. Public schools are scoring just as good, if not better. And then technology will redefine education and it will close this gap. Again, we're in the technology age where we need more development for education. So we use technology. Kids are always in front of screens. Let's use the screens for good. Let's teach the kids how to use technology for educational purposes. And we also have to teach our teachers, train our teachers how to use technology in the classroom effectively. We need more funding, which of course is a kind of an obvious one, but we need more funding. We have less funding today than we did 10 years ago, yet we have a much, much higher population of kids in school at this point. And so funding is a big need. Without equitable funding across the board, we will lose the battle eventually to a lot of these kids, especially teachers. So we do need more funding. Salaries need to be more competitive. Let's keep the teachers. Let's retain the teachers, keep them here. We need more standards across the board so that we're all reaching the same goal. We all have benchmarks of where we're at. And then let's cut out some of the testing. In my opinion, we do too much testing. And again, if we go to Finland's ideas of how they school, they have very, very few tests. And they do very, very well in the world. So I believe cutting out testing would be very beneficial. And once again, following Finland's steps, they have no charter schools in Finland. They have equitable funding across the board and fewer tests, and that makes them very successful. And I think they kind of have the recipe for success. And so I agree with following their lead. I agree with the book, Finding Superman. I believe that public schools are just as good, if not better, than charter schools. And we really need to invest in the 90% of what all schools are, and that's public schools.